Well, we've lost Robert Redford. Rest in peace, Robert Redford. You will be greatly missed. Oh, how many shows and movies have we enjoyed? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right? That was his big first breakout movie. Um, there's just so many. But you know what's really weird? I this Twilight Zone episode that he was in, and it really foretold the type of death he experienced. I don't know. I think in my opinion. So I thought I would talk about this because it's almost like he foretold how his own death would go because he kind of played the Grim Reaper. So, do you remember this Twilight Zone episode that he was in? It was called Nothing in the Dark, and it was released on January 5th, 1962. It was the 16th episode of the show's third season. So it was episode 81 of the Twilight Zone series, and it came out right at the height of the Twilight Zone popularity. So that was 1962. And he basically played the Grim Reaper. So in the show, because I would pop it up here, but I'm probably going to get copyrighted, so I'm just going to explain it. The story followed an elderly woman. The character's name was Wanda Dunn. This was played by the actress Gladys Cooper. More about her later. She was an elderly recluse, barricaded in her rundown apartment. Remember, the show was all black and white, so it looked even more rundown. And she was convinced that venturing outside would invite and lead to her death. So, of course, a young workman shows up. It's Robert Redford. He's playing Harold Belden. He arrives. Apparently, he's wounded from a fall, and she lets him in to her apartment despite her fears, basically her xenophobia, right? So, only to discover he's a very, I'll call it like a gentle grim reaper. Yeah. He's a gentle personification of death, basically. And, instead of like this scary guy in a big cloak and dark, no, he's this 25-year-old blonde, very soft spoken, injured young man that comes to her apartment. And he eases her death, basically. And he's talking with her. They explore mortality, fear of the unknown, the idea that death can be compassionate rather than terrifying. And there's like a long, it's like a three line quote he gives her at the end, but it basically says, what you feared would come with death, what you feared would be like an explosion, is coming like a whisper. And there's more to the quote. I'll come back to that in a second. But in a nutshell, that was the episode. And what was interesting is that episode of The Twilight Zone with Robert Redford was written by the same author, George Clayton Johnson, who wrote Ocean's 11. And Brad Pitt was in that. And Brad Pitt knew Robert Redford. He was trying to take after his career, stuff like that. So I thought that was like an interesting little, I don't know, tidbit. George Clayton Johnson, who wrote Ocean's 11, also wrote The Shadow People. I need to look into that. I'm not really sure, but apparently it was I don't know. I don't know much about it. I'm gonna have to look into it. But anyway, so the set that they used for the Twilight episode with Robert Redford, they were recycling sets that they've used on other episodes. So if something looks familiar, yeah. And they were trying to make it look really confined just to heighten the claustrophobic tension that the older woman was going through, that she was afraid to die. And then here he comes saying, death is really peaceful. And, you're not going to be alone because I'm here with you. And I love it that he wasn't this scary Grim Reaper. What does that remind you of? Remember when Brad Pitt was in that movie and played a gentle Grim Reaper? What was the name of that movie with Brad Pitt? What was it? Oh, I can't remember. I'm sure you guys know. And that's such a good movie. I feel I've got to rewatch that movie. So that episode was actually praised for its emotional depth and the powerhouse performances. And Redford soon came out with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I mean, not right after that, because he was only 25 when he filmed this. I think he was in his 30s when that other movie came out. Yeah, because came out in the 70s, right? The very early 70s. Okay. So some coincidences. So here he plays this gentle Grim Reaper who's telling this woman, you're going to die peacefully, like everything's going to be fine. It's going to come like a whisper. And, Robert Redford in his own home, he just died. Well, that'd be today, September 16th, 2025. He made it to 89 years old. The woman in the Twilight Zone episode, she lived till she was 95. And another little coincidence, the other gentleman in the show was he was like the, I don't know, I'm going to say the trash taker out guy, the custodian, whatever. I'll get the burly character. He was also in Billy the Kid and El Dorado. He played the suspicious sanitation worker that was trying to evict Wanda, adding menace to the show before the great reveal that Robert Redford's the Grim Reaper. Anyway, he lived to age 95 also. And then here's Robert Redford at 89, almost making it to 90. So they've all lived really, really long lives. I don't know. In my opinion, that's a long life. So Robert Redford dies in the comfort peacefully in his own home. Apparently, he's passed in his sleep. That's amazing. Surrounded by his family, really echoing the episodes of that Twilight Zone theme, right? Of a serene, nonviolent death that comes like a whisper, that you're never alone, and it's very gentle. And I love that for him because, listen, I did a deep dive and I have been researching, is there anything unusual or supernatural or paranormal or anything weird attached to him? I could not find anything. So, and I know he loved the outdoors, because where was he in Sundance? Where's Sundance? Is that in Utah? I don't know. I have to look at that. I think because he died his home was in Sundance. I want to say that's Utah, but is it Colorado? I'll have to look for that. But anyway, so let's see, fans have been flooding on social media, commenting his live, tributing all his movies and whatnot. Kind of wonderful. And people are echoing his comment from that Twilight Zone episode that death comes like a whisper. And so I believe his own death was just as gentle as his character was explaining how death would be to that woman. And I just think it's very prophetic, right? It's like he didn't know it, but he was going to describe how his own death went. I think that's an interesting coincidence, if any. Yeah. So do you guys remember that Twilight Zone episode? Did you watch that? Yeah. So let me see if I can find. They say, Gladys Cooper, that's who played the woman, lived to 95. She outlasted many co-stars she worked with. And that's all I could really find. She was in The Song of Bernadette. Okay. Anything else interesting? Couldn't find anything more about R.G. Armstrong, who played the sanitation worker in that episode. It makes you want to go back and watch that Twilight Zone episode. I don't think a lot of people would even realize that's Robert Redford because he is so young in that episode. He is. And remember The Way We Were? He was in that movie with Barbra Streisand. What other? What was that movie he was in? He played the multimillionaire in Las Vegas with Demi Moore. And what was the name of that one? I can't remember the names. I remember the movies. I just can't remember the names. But I really like that movie too. And then he was recently in that, I don't know, I didn't really like the movie. It was called The Discovery. It came out in 2017. It was about, he was trying to prove the afterlife exists. And I thought it was really kind of a dark and depressing movie. I did not love it. I did get through it, but I don't even recommend it. I feel like it was a little depressing. Yeah. And then I did like that movie he was in a few years ago with, what's the name? Again, you're going to have to comment below the names of these movies. I'm not remembering, but he was on his yacht and the yacht gets a hole in it. Came out a few years ago. It was filling with water. There was no lines or words in the entire movie. And it's just him trying to save himself and the boat. It was a good movie. I can't remember the name of it. If you guys remember the name, comment below if you can. That'd be great. So he did offer some advice to young filmmakers earlier this year in 2025. He said, get involved and don't move quickly from one project or one thing to the next event because, young people today, it's such a short attention span, right? Moving from one thing to one thing to one thing, because the internet moves so fast and videos move so fast. And he was like, slow down, sink your teeth and get really involved in what you're working in, so it kind of sticks, and then move on to the next thing. Anyway, I thought that was just really good. That was really good advice. He was like, stick with it long enough to make a change, whether that's in their career or in the world or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So, tribute to Robert Redford, rest in peace, right? Oh, here's the full quote he said in that Twilight Zone episode, I guess. He said, talking about death to the woman, he said, "You see, there's no shock, no engulfment, no tearing asunder. What you feared would come like an explosion is like a whisper. What you thought was the end, it's just the beginning." So, Robert Redford, if you can hear us and you're on the other side, because I do believe you have made it to a positive place, right? What some people call heaven, a high vibrational area near the all-encompassing unconsciousness, or God, right? I think he's there. And so rest in peace to you. And we all are grateful that for the time you were here on this planet. At least I know I was. I loved his movies. Seems like he was a pretty nice guy, too. Okay, everybody. Thanks for being here.